My name is Marianne Cole. I'm 38 years old, and my mother hasn't spoken my name in over 20 of them. That's not an exaggeration. That's not poetic. That's just the truth. In her world, I vanished at 16. The last thing she said to me was, "You were never supposed to happen." That sentence broke something in me. I still remember where I was standing, in the hallway, my bag in hand, shoes unlaced, rain streaking, down the window behind her. I was waiting for her to say something else, anything else. But she turned her back and walked into the kitchen like she hadn't just ended our entire story. She kept Owen, of course. My half-brother, her second child, her second chance, born into a house that had already decided I was too much to love. He was 2 years younger than me, all grins and easy charm, a golden boy even when his hands were dirty. She loved him out, loud enough for the both of us. I learned to make myself small in that house, to fold myself into corners, to apologize for needing anything at all. When she told me to leave, I did. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took the bag she had packed, neatly, deliberately, like a chore she'd been waiting to finish, and I walked out the door. My father, who hadn't lived with us since I was 10, drove 6 hours to pick me up without asking a single question. He wasn't a warm man. He didn't tell stories or make pancakes. But he showed up. And sometimes, that's enough to keep a child from sinking completely. His house was quiet, books stacked against the walls, the air always faintly smelling of black coffee. He made space for me, awkwardly but consistently. We ate in silence most nights. I didn't tell him what. She said, "I don't think I needed to. I got through high school by pretending to be invisible. I wasn't bullied. I wasn't adored. I was the girl whose name teachers always mispronounced, whose essays were always a little too sad. I found comfort in novels, in libraries, in quiet corners of the world where no one asked questions. I kept a notebook filled with quotes that made me feel like someone had written them just for me. One page read, 'You are not unwanted. You are unclaimed.' I memorized that line like a prayer. College was better. Distance helped. I chose a school in another state, far from her, far from the town where my name had become something people's whispered. I studied literature. I learned to speak with confidence, at least in classrooms. I worked part-time in bookstores, surrounded by people who didn't know my past. I began editing freelance. I found joy in precision, in fixing sentences that didn't quite fit. Maybe because I couldn't fix the ones she left me with. I never called her. She never wrote. My birthdays passed like ordinary Thursdays. Holidays were just quieter weekends. I told myself I didn't miss her. I told myself I didn't care. Then 3 weeks ago, everything cracked. A letter arrived. No return address. Just my full name on the front, Marianne Cole, written in her unmistakable script, sharp and slanted like it always had been. I froze. When I saw it, I held it like it might burn. I left it on the counter for a day, then in a drawer for another. On the third night, I opened it at 3 a.m., heart racing like it remembered something my mind refused to admit. "Marianne, I'm sick. I need your help. There's no one else. No greeting, no apology, no love, Mom. Just that. A handful of words, a return address in Oregon, and 20 years of silence hanging between the lines like fog. I should have thrown it away. I thought about it. I tried. But something in me kept circling back. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't read. I found myself replaying old moments like cracked films, her brushing my hair when I was 5, her voice at the door calling Owen for dinner, the day she said nothing when I got into college. Nothing. Not even a well done. Why now? Why me? Still, I packed a bag. I didn't tell anyone. Not that there was anyone to tell. My world had become quiet by design. I got in the car, set the GPS, and began driving west. through long stretches of highway, across fog-covered hills, past towns that looked like secrets. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my chest felt like it was full of glass. Now I'm here. A tiny motel with peeling paint and flickering lights. I'm 1 hour from her front door. My mother, the woman who erased me. I don't know what she expects. An embrace? Forgiveness? What she's getting is the version of me she never met. And I don't owe her anything. The next morning, I left the motel just after dawn. The parking lot was empty except for my car and a delivery truck idling near the diner across the street. I hadn't slept. My eyes stung from the night, but my body moved like it remembered what I had decided before my brain could second-guess it. It was a short drive, just under an hour, but I took the long way. Winding roads, early fog drifting through pine trees like ghosts refusing to settle. Oregon was beautiful in a way that made me feel both smaller and strangely braver. I rolled down the window, let the cold air sting my face. I wanted to feel awake. I wanted something to anchor me. The closer I got, the more my hands tightened on the steering wheel. I imagined what I'd see. Would she be standing at the door? Would the house still smell like lilacs and wood polish? Would she look at me and recognize her daughter? Or would she stare through me, the way she always had, like I was a shadow in the wrong place? The house was older than I remembered, smaller too. The paint had faded into something colorless. The yard was overgrown, ivy crawling up the porch railings like it had been waiting for her to stop caring. I parked down the street and sat there, for a long time, engine off, heart loud in my chest. I didn't knock right away. I looked at the windows, curtains drawn. One of them cracked open just enough to let the light in, or out. I got out of the car slowly, my legs stiff, palms clammy. I wasn't afraid of her. Not really. I was afraid of who I would become once I stepped inside. I rang the bell. Once. Twice. No answer. I knocked. I was just about to turn away when I heard it, the soft shuffle of feet. Then the door creaked open. She looked older. Of course she did. But it wasn't just the gray in her hair or the lines around her mouth. It was the way her shoulders folded in on themselves, the way her hand clutched the edge of the door like it was the only thing keeping her upright. For a second, she didn't say anything. Her eyes met mine and stayed there, unblinking. "Marianne," she said. My name didn't sound right in her mouth, like she'd borrowed it from someone else, like it didn't belong to her anymore. I nodded, once, sharply. "You said you needed help." She stepped aside silently. I walked past her into the house I had once called home. The air was heavy. Not dusty, just still. As if time hadn't moved since I left. The same framed photos on the hallway wall. Same faint scent of her perfume, though dulled and distant. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror above the table. I looked like a visitor at a funeral. She led me to the kitchen. The chairs were mismatched now. The table was covered in unpaid bills and pill bottles. I saw her hand tremble as she pulled out a seat for me. I sat, slowly, and she sat across from me. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, she said, "I didn't think you'd come." Neither did I. She nodded, eyes lowered. "I'm not dying. Not yet." "Then why now?" She looked up at me then, and something passed between us. Anger, grief, memory. I couldn't tell what it was. "I thought I had time," she whispered. And then suddenly I didn't. My hands don't work like they used to. I forget things. I get scared at night. Her voice cracked. I didn't know who else to call. I leaned back. The words felt like a trick, a performance, a plea rehearsed in loneliness. "I'm not here to comfort you," I said. "I know." "I'm not here to forgive you," she nodded. "I haven't forgotten anything." "I wouldn't expect you to." We sat in silence again. Her breathing was shallow, her fingers twitching slightly in her lap. She looked small, not like a mother, not like a villain, just a woman worn thin by time and regret. But I wasn't ready to soften. Not yet. You could have called me 10. Years ago, I said. 5. Even 1. But you waited until you were scared enough. Her eyes welled, but the tears didn't fall. I thought you'd hate me. I did. And now? I don't know. I stood up. I couldn't sit still any longer. I walked to the sink, looked out the window. The garden had died. No flowers, just soil and weeds. I remembered planting tulips there once. I was 8. She had smiled that day. Just once, and then never again. I'm staying at the motel, I said. I'll come by tomorrow. We'll talk. But I'm not here to fix anything. She didn't argue. She just nodded, slowly, like each motion cost her something. I left without saying goodbye. Outside, the air smelled like pine and cold. I sat, in my car with the door open, the wind pushing against my face. I should have felt something, triumph, closure, pain. Instead, I just felt tired. But I had looked her in the eyes. And this time, I hadn't looked away. I didn't go back the next morning. Instead, I walked. I left the motel just after sunrise and followed a narrow path that curved behind the lot, leading into the woods. My boots crunched over wet gravel and pine needles. The air was sharp, clean, and quiet in the way only deep forest silence can be. I let it fill me, the kind of silence that doesn't demand anything back. For the first time in years, I let myself remember. There was a time I used to wait at the window for her to come home. I was 7. She worked late and sometimes forgot to call. I'd sit with my chin resting on the windowsill, the street lamp flickering outside, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders like a shield. When she came through the door, she always looked surprised to see me awake, like I'd broken some agreement she never said out loud. I never told anyone how much I longed for her attention. I didn't have the words for it then, and now that I do, they feel hollow. When I returned to the motel, it was almost noon. I took the longest shower I could. I sat on the edge of the bed and watched the light crawl across the carpet. Then, I drove. This time, she was waiting. She stood in the doorway, sweater pulled tight around her shoulders, her eyes fixed on me like she expected me to disappear if she blinked. I didn't speak. I walked past her, straight to the living room. It looked the same. Faded furniture, muted colors, a fireplace no one had used in years. Dust clung to the light. A photo of Owen still sat on the bookshelf, younger and grinning. No sign of me. She followed quietly and sat across from me. I didn't sleep, she said. Neither did I. We sat in that fragile peace for a while before I broke it. Why did you really call me? Her hands twisted in her lap. I told you, I'm sick. You could have called a nurse, a neighbor. You have friends. She hesitated. They don't know about you. I blinked. They don't know I exist? I never talked about you. So I was a secret. She didn't deny it. That hurt more than I expected. I told myself it was to protect you, she said quietly. But really, I think it was to protect me. From what? She looked up, and in her eyes I saw something brittle. From who I was when I let you go. I swallowed hard. There was no way to answer that. She stood and walked to the mantel, picking up an old photo in a tarnished silver frame. Do you remember this? It was of me and Owen. I was maybe 10. He had his arm around my shoulders, and I was smiling. Really? Smiling. She must have taken it. I hadn't seen that photo in decades. You kept this? I asked. She nodded. I put it away for years. I only brought it out after I mailed the letter. I didn't know what to do with that. My voice felt tight when I said, You never answered my letters. She turned, What letters? I wrote to you when I was in college. 3 times. She stared at me, stunned. I never got them. I believed her. Suddenly, something shifted in me. All those years I'd spent thinking she'd thrown my words away, thinking she read them and didn't care. What if they never reached her? What if I'd spent years bleeding into a silence that wasn't her choice, but mine? I sent them to this house, I whispered. We moved after you left, just for a year. We came back later. And just like that, 2 decades of rage cracked, slightly. Not erased, but shaken. She walked back to the couch and sat down again, slower this time. You were the strongest person I knew, she said. You scared me. You still do. I wasn't strong. I was surviving. Same thing. Sometimes, I used to imagine you opening my letters and not replying, I added. I used to think you didn't care. And now? I don't know. Maybe I do. Maybe I'm still angry. That's all right, she said. I'm angry at myself, too. We sat in the stillness again. But this time it felt different. Less like silence and more like acknowledgement. Like a bridge half built. I think about you every day, she said suddenly. I didn't answer. I imagined what you looked like now. What kind of woman you became. I gave a half smile. You wouldn't have recognized her. She looked at me long and slow. I think I do. I stood. I'll be back tomorrow. Why? She asked. I paused at the door. Because I need to know how this ends. And maybe, just maybe, so did she. The next morning I returned early. The light hadn't fully crept into the sky yet, and her street still lay in shadow, the trees casting long, slanted silhouettes across the pavement. I didn't knock this time. She had left the door unlocked, as if she knew I would come back, or as if part of her was hoping I wouldn't. She was sitting in the living room in the same spot as yesterday, wrapped in the same gray cardigan, like she hadn't moved at all. A cup of tea sat untouched beside her. When she saw me, her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. I didn't give her time to speak. I sat across from her, pulled a notebook from my bag, and opened it slowly. I wrote down some questions, I said. I need you to answer them. She blinked, startled. All right. No stories, no excuses. Just the truth. She nodded. Once. I flipped to the first page. Did you plan to send me away? No. Then why did it happen? She looked at the floor. Because I panicked. I was failing. Your father had already left. I was working nights. I felt like I was unraveling. When Owen was born, it was like I had a second chance, and I took it, even if it meant letting go of the first. I looked at her closely. She didn't flinch. Did you love me? Yes, she said too quickly. Then why couldn't I feel it? Her hands trembled in her lap. Because I didn't know how to give it. My mother didn't love me either. Not really. She fed me, clothed me, told me to stand up straight. But I don't remember her touching me with kindness. So I didn't know how to do it differently. And you needed more. I was a child. I know. I wrote something down without looking at her. The words blurred slightly on the page. Do you regret it? She took a long time to answer. Every day. Not just what I did, but what I lost. You were brilliant. So alive. You used to ask questions. That made me uncomfortable. That's not a reason to abandon someone, but I did. I chose silence. Because silence was easier. I turned to a blank page and stared at it for a while. Then finally, I looked up. There's a part of me, I said, that wants to scream at you until the walls crack. And another part that wants to walk away and never come back. But there's also this strange, exhausted part that just wants to understand. She didn't respond. She sat still, her fingers tight around the handle of her mug, which she still hadn't touched. I came back here thinking I would find a monster, I continued. I prepared for it. I practiced what I'd say. I imagined you cold, defensive, smug, but what I found was someone too tired to lie. And I don't know what to do with that. Tears had begun to gather in her eyes, but they didn't fall. She looked older than she had yesterday. Not from sickness, but from memory. I don't deserve your understanding, she said. No. But maybe I need to offer it anyway. Not for you. For me. We sat there in silence for a while. I kept your books, she said suddenly. What? Your childhood books. The ones you used to read under the covers with a flashlight. I packed them in a box and stored them in the attic. I don't know why. I told myself I was clearing space, but I never threw them out. Something in my throat caught. I hadn't thought of those books in years. You never told me. I told myself I would, when the time was right. I let that hang in the air. Do you want to see them? She asked. I hesitated, then nodded. She rose slowly and led me up the stairs. The house creaked beneath our steps. At the end of the hallway was a door I hadn't opened in decades. She pulled it wide, revealing the attic ladder. The smell hit me immediately. Dust, old paper, the scent of untouched years. She climbed with effort. I followed. In the dim light, she crossed to a corner and knelt. Her movements were slower now, but careful. She pulled a cardboard box toward us and opened it. Inside were worn paperbacks, corners bent, covers faded. My name was written inside each one in my own looping childhood scrawl. I reached out, picked one up. Charlotte's Web. I turned the cover, and there it was. This book belongs to Marianne, written in purple marker. For a long time, we said nothing. She just sat beside me on the attic floor, and I turned the pages slowly, as if trying to touch the girl I used to be. Thank you, I said finally, and I meant it. Not for the books, not for the attic, for showing up, for trying, however late. I don't know where this goes, I added. Neither do I, she whispered, but I'm here. She looked at me. I know. That night, I stayed in the attic long after she went back downstairs. The silence there wasn't hollow. It was full. Full of the rustle of old pages, the faint echo of childhood laughter still caught between the rafters. I ran my fingers over the worn covers of those books, trying to reconcile how something so small, so ordinary, could feel like proof that I had existed inside her life, even when I had felt erased from it. Eventually, I descended the ladder and stepped quietly into the hall. Her bedroom door was closed. A thin sliver of warm light leaked out from the bottom. I didn't knock. I wasn't ready for more. I returned to the guest room and lay on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling until the sky outside shifted from black to blue. The next morning, we didn't speak much. She made coffee. I drank it in silence. We existed near each other, not in harmony, not yet, but in something closer to consent. She didn't try to fill the space, and I didn't ask her to. Around noon, I found her sitting at the kitchen table with a photo album I had never seen before. I thought you'd thrown these out, I said as I sat across from her. I did, she replied. But I dug them out of the box in the garage last year. I wasn't ready to open them until now. She turned the page slowly. There I was, 4 years old, standing in the backyard in a red coat, leaves swirling around my boots. My eyes were wide, my smile uncertain. She was in the corner of the frame, reaching out toward me. Why did you keep so many photos if you didn't want to remember me? I asked. I always wanted to remember you, she said. I just didn't know how to do it without breaking apart. I closed the album. We can't change what you did. I can't go back and be 8 again, or 10 or 16. You can't mother a grown woman. I know. But maybe, I continued, You can start acting like you wish you had. She looked up at me. What does that mean? It means you don't get to ask for forgiveness with words. You have to earn it in moments. Later that day, I offered to drive her to the doctor. She didn't ask me to. She simply left the appointment card on the table and walked away. I took it as a quiet request. The car ride was long and quiet. She sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, staring out the window as we passed farmland and fog, trees stripped bare by autumn. Her profile was softer in the morning light. Tired, yes, but less guarded. Do you think you'll get better? I asked after a while. She took a moment. They're still testing. It could be degenerative. Could be something else. Are you scared? She didn't answer right away. Yes, but not of the illness. Then what? Of disappearing before I get to prove I'm more than what I was. At the clinic, I filled out her paperwork. I helped her into the chair. I waited while the nurse called her name. Then I sat for an hour in a room full of strangers holding folded jackets in their laps and reading magazines they didn't care about. I didn't know who I was becoming, but I stayed. After the appointment, she asked if we could take a detour. There's somewhere I want to go, she said. I followed her directions through winding roads until we reached a small park tucked behind a row of pine trees. There was a bench facing a shallow lake. She led me to it slowly, breathing heavier than usual. We sat. The lake was quiet, barely rippling. I used to bring you here, she said. Before everything. You loved throwing sticks in the water. You'd laugh and splash and cry when I said it was time to leave. I didn't remember, but I wanted to. I used to think I'd get it right, she continued. That I'd figure it out before it was too late. But time passed so quickly. One day I looked up and you were gone, and I had let you go. I turned to her. You didn't just let me go. You pushed. I know. She pulled something from her coat pocket. A crumpled, faded drawing. A child's sketch of two stick figures, holding hands, one tall, one small. You drew this, she said. I found it in an old drawer. I couldn't throw it away. I took it in my hands. My name was scrawled in the corner in purple crayon. The paper was yellowed, soft at the edges, but still intact. Why are you showing me this now? I asked. Because I kept it. Even after. I said you didn't exist. I lied to everyone, but I never let this go. We sat like that for a long time, just the two of us, her pain beside mine. The wind picked up, carrying a smell of wet leaves and earth. The world felt momentarily suspended, neither past nor future. Only now. You could have been better, I whispered. I still can try. Then try. And for the first time, she didn't say anything. She just reached for my hand. The first time I made dinner for her, I burned the rice and overcooked the chicken. She didn't complain. She sat at the table, hands folded neatly in front of her, and said, "It smells like you tried." That sentence stayed with me longer than the taste of the food. I stayed for 3 more days after that. Not because anything had been resolved, but because something in the air between us had softened. Only slightly, but enough. She didn't try to mother me, and I didn't pretend to be a daughter. We shared space like people learning to speak again after forgetting how. She moved more slowly than I remembered. Sometimes I caught her leaning on the wall for balance, her lips pressed tight. She refused help. I gave it anyway, quietly. I did her grocery shopping, folded laundry she didn't ask me to touch. I cleaned the living room while she napped, turning over dusty picture frames and finding old receipts pressed between books. One morning, I found her in the backyard, kneeling beside the rose bush she used to prune every spring. Her hands trembled around the clippers and her breath came sharp. "You shouldn't be out here alone," I said, stepping into the grass. "I needed to feel useful," she replied, without looking up. "Let me help." We trimmed the stems together, cutting away what was brittle, leaving room for something to bloom. If not this season, then maybe the next. She didn't speak. Neither did I. But I think we both understood something was changing in the silence. That afternoon, I found an envelope, with my name on it resting on the kitchen table. My full name, Marianne Cole, written in her careful, slanted script. The paper was thick, folded in half with no seal. I opened it slowly, already bracing. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. It was a memory. She wrote about a night I had buried, so deeply I wasn't sure it was real. I was 9. She had locked herself in the bathroom, and I had sat outside the door for what felt like hours. Owen had been wailing in his crib. I had tried to feed him, but I was too small to lift the bottle. Right, I remember humming, not for him, but for myself. She said that when she heard my voice through the door, something stopped in her. She had been holding her keys, shoes on, coat halfway over her shoulders. She had been ready to walk away. Not from us, but from everything. But then I heard you, she wrote. And the sound of you trying to survive without me was worse than anything I was running from. I didn't cry. Not at first. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into my pocket like something alive. I didn't mention it. I didn't need to. But that night I made dinner again. Better this time. I poured her water, handed her the salt before she asked. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. After we ate, we sat in the living room. The television was on but muted. She picked at the frayed edges of the blanket on her lap. The house creaked with evening. I want to make something clear, I said, my voice soft but firm. She looked at me, waiting. I'm not staying forever. She nodded. I know. I'm not here to erase what happened. I wouldn't ask you to. But I don't want to leave angry. She turned to me. That's enough for me. Later that evening, I stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door of my childhood bedroom. I hadn't opened it since I returned. Something about it felt sacred and sealed, like entering would disturb a version of me that no longer existed. But I needed to see it. I opened the door slowly. The air smelled of dust and something faintly floral, lavender maybe. The wallpaper had faded. The bed was neatly made. Books lined the shelves in crooked rows. A drawing I had taped to the closet door was still there. A stick figure girl with wild hair, arms spread wide. I stepped inside and sat on the bed. The springs creaked under my weight. I rested my hands in my lap and looked around slowly, letting the room speak. Everything was still here. And yet, nothing was. I stayed there for nearly an hour. The next morning, I found her at the kitchen table, already dressed, her hair pulled back neatly. There's someone I want you to meet, she said. I poured coffee. Who? My sister. I paused. I didn't know you had one. Half-sister, she clarified. Her name's Lorna. We haven't spoken in years, but she called last night, said she heard I was sick. Do you want to see her? I don't know, she admitted. But I think I need to. Do you want me to come? She didn't answer right away, then, if you're willing? I am. A beat of silence. Then let's go, she said. We drove in silence. She had written the address on a scrap of paper torn from the corner of an old envelope. Her handwriting had grown shakier since the last time I'd seen it, more uneven, as if her thoughts moved faster than her fingers could follow. The house was an hour away, nestled in a wooded neighborhood that smelled of pine and damp soil. The trees pressed in from every direction. Her sister's house was small, white, with peeling paint and wind chimes that whispered against the porch. I haven't seen her in nearly 2 decades, she said as we parked. Why now? She called me. She said she wanted to talk. Do you believe her? I don't know. We stepped onto the porch together. She knocked. The door opened within seconds. Lorna was taller, stronger looking, with silver streaks in her thick black hair and sharp, assessing eyes. For a moment, she stared at me, then at my mother, then back at me. "You must be Marianne." I nodded. "Yes." She stepped aside. "Come in." The living room smelled of lemon polish and old wood. A pot of tea steamed on a tray by the window. Lorna gestured for us to sit. No hugs, no warmth, just observation. She moved like someone who had been disappointed too many times to pretend anymore. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come," she said to my mother. "Neither was I. You look thin. You look older." A beat passed. Then we all sat. I expected to be silent, just an observer, but it didn't take long before I became the reason they were talking. "She told me about you," Lorna said, her eyes still fixed on mine. "Not everything, but enough to know she made mistakes." "She didn't just make mistakes," I said. "She left scars." My mother looked down. Lorna sighed. "She always ran from things, from people, from responsibility. Our father was the same, cold, distant. You'd ask him a question, and he'd leave the room." "She never talked about him," I said. "She wouldn't," Lorna replied, "because she was afraid she'd become him. And she did." The silence thickened. "I used to think she hated me," I said after a while. "Now I'm not sure what she felt." "She didn't hate you," Lorna said. "But she didn't know how to love without vanishing inside it. My mother didn't defend herself. She just sat there, her fingers clenched around the edge of the teacup, her eyes wet. I was 16 when she left home," Lorna continued. "Just vanished. No note, no goodbye. I found her coat on the stairs and thought she was coming back. She didn't." "She told me you never forgave her," I said. "I didn't," Lorna replied. "Until now." That startled both of us. "Why?" "Now?" my mother asked, her voice barely audible. "Because it took me this long to realize that not forgiving you kept me in the same place you left me, and I'm tired of being there." She stood, walked over to the window, looked out at the trees. "You were always scared of staying still," she said. "That's why you kept moving. From cities, from husbands, from me, from her. I didn't expect to be included, but somehow it felt right. And yet, here you are," Lorna added, turning to my mother again. "And she's with you." We stayed for 2 hours. They didn't say much else. But something had opened between them. A thin, tentative bridge neither of them dared step too far onto, and that was enough, for now. On the drive home, my mother said nothing. Her hands rested in her lap, her gaze lost in the trees flickering past the window. Finally, as we neared the town limits, she spoke. "Did she seem angry to you?" "No," I said. "She seemed finished with being angry." She nodded. "That's harder than it sounds." We didn't talk about it again that night. I helped her into bed, made sure her pills were in reach, closed the door quietly behind me. Back in the guest room, I lay awake listening to the wind press against the windows. I thought of Lorna, of the kind of woman she'd become. Hardened, but still open. I wondered if I would ever reach that point. The next morning, I found my mother sitting at the kitchen table with a shoebox open in front of her. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Some were unopened. Some were addressed to people I didn't recognize. Others were clearly never sent. "What's this?" I asked. "Letters I wrote but didn't send," she said. "To your father, to Lorna, to you." I sat down. She handed me one, dated 3 years ago. I opened it slowly. "Marianne, today, I thought of the way you used to fall asleep with a book on your chest. You never let me tuck you in. You said you didn't need it. But I still watched the rise and fall of your breath from the hallway, just to make sure you were safe. I don't know how to say I'm sorry without making it worse. So I'll just say I think of you every day. I wish I'd been softer. I wish I'd stayed. I looked up. She was watching me. You never sent this. No. Why? I didn't think I deserved your voice reading it. I folded the letter. Maybe you didn't. But I'm reading it now. And I wasn't angry. I was just tired. But something had shifted. She stood and walked to the sink. Her movements were slow, but steady. Can I make you breakfast? She asked. Only if you let me help. She smiled, truly, fully, for the first time in years. The morning after the letter, something had shifted. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was real. Like the first faint warmth of spring after a long winter, you almost miss it. But when you stop and breathe, you know it's there. We made pancakes. She stood at the stove, and I managed the batter. She insisted on using the chipped blue bowl she'd had since I was a child, even though its handle had been missing for years. We didn't talk much, but we moved in rhythm. She flipped the pancakes, too early, and I overmixed the batter. But they were golden and warm, and we ate them sitting side by side in the quiet morning light. Later, we took a walk down the block. Her steps were slow but deliberate, and she refused the cane even when I offered. She wanted to hold my arm instead, and I let her. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. Same cracked sidewalks, same overgrown hedges. But it felt different, lighter somehow. Maybe because I wasn't walking alone this time. She paused in front of the vacant house 3 doors down. Old man Tiller lived there, she said. He used to give out those terrible molasses candies on Halloween. You hated them. I threw them in the bushes every year, I replied. She laughed, a dry, surprised sound. I should have known. We kept walking. When we returned, she settled on the couch with a blanket and asked me to find the photo albums. I hadn't touched them in years. They were stacked in a crooked pile in the hallway closet, covered in dust and time. We looked through them one by one, some photos I remembered. My first school play. A trip to the beach where my shoes were swept away by the tide. The Christmas I got a telescope and insisted on finding every constellation in the sky, even when clouds covered the stars. But then there were photos I'd never seen. One of her and my father standing outside a hospital. She looked tired but radiant. He was holding a tiny bundle. Me. Another showed her as a teenager, hair wild and long, sitting on the hood of a car beside a younger Lorna. They were smiling like the world hadn't yet disappointed them. She touched that one gently. We were happy for a little while, she said, before everything cracked. What cracked it? Life, she said simply. And the parts of ourselves we refused to name. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was reflective, accepting. In the afternoon, I caught her, humming. A soft, tuneless melody that floated through the hallway. I paused by the doorframe listening. There had been times in my childhood when I'd pressed my ear to that same spot, hoping to hear her voice. And now here it was. Fragile, but unmistakable. She looked up and saw me. Sorry, she said, embarrassed. Don't be. That night, I set the table for 2. Lit a candle even though she rolled her eyes at it. I served leftover pasta and made a half-hearted attempt at salad. She poured us both a glass of wine, barely more than a sip. To small things, she said, raising her glass. To second chances, I replied. We clinked glasses. The sound was light and tentative, like a whisper between strangers who might be something else someday. But peace is rarely left untouched. The phone rang. She hesitated before answering. Her face changed the moment she heard the voice on the other end. The color drained slowly, like sunlight fading from a room. When she hung up, I waited. "That was Lorna," she said. I straightened. "Is she okay?" She went to see a doctor. "Routine," she said. "But they found something." My stomach turned. "What kind of something?" She didn't say much, just that she's scared. We sat in silence again, but this one was different. Not the silence of tension or distance. It was the kind of silence where two people realize that the fragile thing they're building might not survive another storm. "I should go see her," my mother whispered. "I'll drive you." She nodded, but her eyes were far away. Before we turned in for the night, she paused at the hallway again, touching the frame of my childhood bedroom. "I was wrong to keep this door closed all these years," she said. "It was your way of protecting something, or avoiding it." She opened the door slowly this time. I followed her in. The room was untouched, as though it had been sealed in amber. My books, my drawings, even the dent in the wall from where I'd flung a hairbrush in anger, still there. She sat on the bed and motioned for me to join her. "I don't know how much time I have left," she said softly. "And I don't just mean life. I mean time to fix things, to be better." "You're already trying," I said. "But what if it's not enough?" I took her hand. "Then we'll keep trying anyway." She squeezed my fingers. "Do you think we're too broken to be something whole again?" I shook my head. "I think we've been broken long enough." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Outside, the wind had picked up. Branches scratched against the window, like the world was reminding us that everything was still moving, still changing. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what might come next. Because this time, I wouldn't be facing it alone. We left at dawn. The sky was pale and aching, the horizon smudged with soft grays and amber streaks. My mother sat beside me in the car, her seat rigid, her shoulders drawn in. She hadn't spoken since we pulled out of the driveway, her hands resting in her lap like two birds too tired to fly. I didn't speak either. Some mornings didn't need words, just quiet and motion. She sounded smaller, she murmured finally, her voice breaking the silence like a whisper against glass. I nodded. She did. She never used to sound like that, even when she was hurt. I glanced over. People change when they're waiting for someone who might never come. That silenced her again. But it wasn't angry silence. It was the kind that builds around regret. Lorna lived in a faded white cottage past the bend in the hills, where the grass grew high and unkempt, brushing against the old wooden fence like memories unwilling to stay buried. When we arrived, the porch light was still on, though the sun had climbed high enough to dull it. She opened the door before we knocked, as if she'd been standing behind it for hours, listening for footsteps that matched something old in her bones. She looked thinner. Her cheeks hollowed, her hair tied back without care. But her eyes, those storm-colored eyes, still held the weight of history. My mother froze on the threshold. Lorna didn't move. "Hi," my mother said, almost inaudible. Lorna stepped aside. "Come in." The house smelled of ginger tea and lavender oil, though beneath it lingered something metallic and medicinal. I noticed a pill organizer on the kitchen table and a shawl draped over the arm of a chair like a forgotten apology. We sat in the small living room, the fire burning low in the hearth, casting their faces in flickers of orange and shadow. "The doctors?" my mother asked. Lorna nodded. "Stage 3, possibly 4. I'm starting chemo on Monday." A silence settled in. My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. Then finally, "I'm sorry." "For the cancer?" Lorna asked softly. "For all of it." The air thickened. "I was angry for years," Lorna said. "You walked out without a goodbye. I was 16. I didn't know how to stay standing without you." I thought I was protecting you. You left me with the very thing you were running from. Tears welled in my mother's eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. I thought I had to disappear to survive. And I thought I had to forget you to grow up. Turns out we were both wrong. They sat in silence again. The clock ticked on the mantel. Rain started against the windows, soft and patient. I kept every letter I never sent, Lorna added. They're in a box upstairs. My mother turned her head. Why, didn't you send them? Because I wanted to hurt you. I wanted you to feel what I felt. Did it help? Lorna shook her head. Not even a little. Later, we stood in the kitchen, watching the kettle boil. My mother reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Lorna's temple. It was a simple gesture, but it cracked something. You were always the brave one, Lorna said. No, I was always running. You're here now. They drank tea in silence. The rain grew louder. I stayed by the window, pretending not to hear the quiet sobs that rose and faded. That evening, we went through old photo albums. Lorna had one from the summer before it all fell apart. Pictures of birthdays, of wet swimsuits hanging on clotheslines, of my mother and Lorna lying side by side under the stars, mouths open mid-laugh. We were happy, my mother whispered. For a while, Lorna replied. I wish I could have frozen us like that. You did, in your mind, but the real us kept aging, hurting, surviving. I was so scared, my mother said, of myself, of what I'd become. Lorna looked at her, her voice quiet but unshaking. We all carry something, but the ones who come back, they're the ones who matter. That night, I helped Lorna into bed. Her movements were slow, careful, as if her body had betrayed her long ago, and she no longer resented it for doing so. She's not who I thought she was, my mother said to me as we stood in the hallway. She's stronger. She always was, I answered. Outside, the rain had stopped. The world was still. In the dim porch light, my mother sat on the swing. I joined her. She leaned into me just slightly. She forgave me. She did. I don't know how to carry that. Just don't let it go. We sat in the silence that followed, the kind that doesn't ache anymore, the kind that heals. The morning after the storm was strangely gentle. A pale sun filtered through the curtains, casting slow-moving patterns across the wooden floor. The house felt still, not the stillness of fear or tension, but something softer, like the moment. Before an orchestra begins to play, when everyone holds their breath at once. I found my mother already in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a chipped porcelain mug. She didn't look at me, but I could tell she hadn't slept. She had a bad night, she said. The coughing didn't stop until sunrise. I nodded, unsure of what to say. Some mornings only asked for presents, not answers. Lorna was resting, in the armchair by the window, a blanket draped over her legs. Her breathing was shallow but steady. She opened her eyes as we entered, a faint smile forming on her lips. Don't look at me like I'm vanishing, she whispered. I'm still here. My mother knelt beside her, gently brushing back a stray curl from Lorna's forehead. We know. You were both loud last night, Lorna added, arguing in silence. It echoes more than you think. We sat around, her, watching the light shift on the floor. The world outside felt distant, like a dream we no longer believed in. I always thought forgiveness was something loud, my mother said suddenly. A shout, a confession, something theatrical. Lorna smiled. Turns out it's quieter than we expect, almost like breathing. I don't know how to keep going after this. Yes, you do, Lorna replied. You already started. They talked for hours about childhood fears, burnt birthday cakes, missed calls, and memories that returned in strange places. Every word felt like a stitch in a cloth long torn. By afternoon, Lorna grew weaker. She asked for the garden doors to be opened, and the breeze carried in the scent of lavender and late summer soil. My mother wrapped another blanket around her and whispered something I didn't catch. But Lorna nodded, as if she'd been waiting to hear exactly that. I stepped outside to give them a moment. The wind rustled the dry leaves, and somewhere a wind chime rang out, a thin, haunting melody. I realized then how rare it is for stories to find their endings at the right time, with the right people. When I returned, Lorna was asleep. My mother looked at me with eyes red but dry. "She's ready," she said. "I don't know if I am. You don't have to be." That night we stayed up late again. We read to her poems, old letters, fragments of forgotten books. And when her breathing paused for a moment longer than it should have, we didn't panic. We just waited. She breathed again. We smiled. But we knew. Time was folding. Before we went to sleep, my mother reached into her bag and pulled out a small journal, one I hadn't seen before. "I started writing again," she said. "It's messy, and maybe no one will ever read it. But I think I finally found a place for the things I couldn't say out loud." I smiled. "That's what stories are for." She looked at me, and something passed between us. A quiet pact to never run from the hard things again. Just before sunrise, Lorna passed away. She didn't struggle. There was no drama. Just a breath in, and then none out. My mother held her, hand long after the warmth faded. I didn't interrupt. We buried her beneath the cherry tree in the backyard. It was what she wanted. Somewhere light could reach her. The days after were strange, filled with both relief and aching emptiness. But they weren't silent anymore. One evening, as we packed the last of Lorna's belongings, I found a letter, with my name on it. Inside, in her uneven handwriting, were just 3 lines. "You carry us now. Don't be afraid to speak what we couldn't. The world is always listening." I stood there a long time, letting the weight of those words settle into my bones. Some inherit houses, others debts. I had inherited voices. Now I sit at my desk, the window open to a quiet evening breeze. I write this not just to remember, but to pass it on. Because stories like these matter, not because they're unique, but because they aren't. They belong to all of us who've ever waited for someone to return or dared to come back ourselves. And if this story found you at the right moment, if it reminded you of a voice you'd buried, or a hand you wish you could still hold, then don't let it fade. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, real, raw, and unforgettable, don't forget to subscribe to Twilight Revenge. And if this story moved you, hit the like button. Sometimes, all it takes is one shared moment to feel seen, and maybe, just maybe, that's the only kind of revenge that matters. Healing, where silence once lived.